I'm haunted by a question, Maggie. I'm haunted for the month of October by this question.
You're haunted by many questions.
This is coming out in November. Scratch that. Spin that back. Reverse it. Making chocolate, of course.
Dark, nutty, absolutely insane. We have seen the Willy Wonka trailer like 25 times, and it's the worst thing I've ever seen.
Well, that's actually a great segue into what we're talking about today. So the subject for today's discussion, we haven't done one of these general theory-based discussions in a while. We did one on what is canon and does it matter?
Uh-huh.
But this is the first one of those in a while. And the question that has been haunting me, I've been fiddling with these notes for months. The question is, what is bad art? Can we define it? Does it exist? So what I've done, it's not just my opinions, and I don't have a definitive answer to this question. I think that's the fun of these sort of chats. I've come up with the 5 answers to that question that I see most often.
Okay.
And I want to play with the pros and cons of those, and then sort of the ramifications
that
of
sounds like fun. Just so the listeners know, this is an idea that Cam has been ruminating on. I know he was thinking about it, but I have not done any prep work. This is me responding in real time, the way we often do with these. I just find that I'm better on the fly.
Yeah. And I need to do some prep.
That means I'm better than you.
Different stroke.
It means you do more work and you look better, but I am better. What is bad art? What is a bad podcast host? Tune in next time and you'll hear all about it. Okay, Cam, what kind of ideas were you thinking?
So how do we define bad art?
How indeed?
So the first metric that I see people use, mostly online, this is what I'm railing against, is they judge it by formal mechanics. For example, the visual arts, they'll say a painting or a drawing of a person is bad if it has imprecise, exaggerated, incorrect anatomy.
Yeah, or like it's about technique, right? Because even if you are doing something stylized, it has to be still like, quote, done well, whatever that means, right?
And this immediately falls apart for me because I love so much stylized art. I love so much abstract art. Or for movies, I love unrealistic dialogue, whether it's Tarantino's quippiness or the stilted, weird formality of Yorgos Lanthimos movies. I love that. I also like unsympathetic characters. I like all of these things that break the rules and the formal mechanics that are used almost in a zombie fashion to judge these things.
Yeah, and I should say a lot of art, especially I'm thinking a lot about visual art here. For context, I work in an art museum, so I think about this a lot. Even though abstract, messy, stylized art is really revered in a lot of circles, for a lot of people, especially just like your average person who's not like thinking about the arts TM often, right? Doesn't like that sort of thing. And so they are like critical of this thing that you're talking about. Like I hear a lot as people walk through like, you know, abstract art galleries, they go, oh, my kid could do that. Or like, why is that on the wall? Like it's just a white canvas or whatever. Like there's no like technical precision or expertise here. So like, why is like, that's not good to me. So a lot of people hold that opinion, even if someone like Jackson Pollock is revered in lots of circles and in history. So, but a lot of people don't like that.
Same thing for books, I think. People judge it by the basic mechanics.
Yeah.
Of
like, is this written well, quote unquote?
Right. Is it clunky or repetitive? Is the pacing bad? But you and I have had 100 interesting conversations off pod about books that have really good plot but bad dialogue, or really good dialogue and bad plot.
Right. And like it's written well, but the story itself is boring, or other way around.
And I think we both love plenty of books that are good in one area and bad in the other.
Yeah. Like my favorite example is like Dan Brown. Like he tells an amazing story. I love how steeped he is in history. I love the pacing of his stories. I love just how fun they are to read. But like, I wouldn't say on an objective level that they're, quote, written well. Like, it's not very good writing. It's like efficient writing, and it like goes straight into your brain and tells you what's going on. But it's not like, oh, that's a beautifully written book, you know?
But you can still get something out of it.
Yeah, and I don't think Dan Brown's a bad writer. Like, I should say that. He's not a bad writer. He's a great storyteller, and he writes great books, so he's a good writer.
So I don't think the formal mechanics metric is good for defining or differentiating bad art.
No, you can care about formal mechanics, but that can't be the only thing you're judging a work of art on. So
the next one I want to play with, and you'll get very quickly my opinions on this calculus, is judging a work of art, whether or not it's good or bad, by its perceived message or its presumed politics.
Oh, God. That's the worst one.
This line of thinking always leads to morality plays,
Truly.
pearl clutching, censorship, all those great outcomes. But it's also, and this is the real problem, it is entirely subjective.
Right.
Down to the person, down to the moment, down to the political cycle. It's
right, down to
completely
what's happening in the world when this movie is, or when this thing is consumed. Yeah.
And the thing that really, I don't know why this old person phrase just came back to me.
You're full of old people phrases.
The thing that really drives me up a tree is when you apply that sort of lens. Say it's, 2016, and you're applying like the whole like Trump-Clinton paradigm to whatever you're reading or watching.
As most people kind of were at that time. How could you not,
Even people making it were trying to make things explicitly, you know, whatever. It was a fun time.
Wow, what a time that was.
The thing that really chaps my ass is when you apply today's politics or opinions or presumptions or binaries, especially because it's always red team, blue team, when you apply that to a work of art made hundreds of years ago. And by today's moral outrage, you try to declare that thing a work of bad art. I think that's really where this thing falls apart. Because the first, when I say bad art being judged by assumed politics, the first thing I think of is like mediocre political diatribe, thinly veiled bullshit art made now. But I think the real problem of it is the historical revisionism. That's what freaks me out when you start like deleting things from history and trying to scrub them out of the canon.
Right, because it doesn't make any sense.
Right.
Because it's one thing to consume a work of art through the lens of your own current time and think, oh, that's really interesting looking at this now. Like, oh, this connects to my situation now in this interesting, unexpected way. Wow, that's interesting how history repeats itself or how things have really changed. Like, it's interesting. It's one thing to like note those things and when looking at it through that lens, but it's another thing entirely to completely discount a work of art or judge it based on this experience that the artist in question was completely not a part of.
And to be an adult is to assume historical context.
Right.
And to be able to learn from things and take the good and account for the bad.
Yeah.
But we don't need to delete Mark Twain. Leave Shakespeare alone.
Yeah, like I hear so often, like the one I hear a lot lately is people reading The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath. And they say, oh, it was really good, but I don't know. It had a lot of problematic racist things in it. And it's like, yes, it can and it does, but that doesn't, it was written in the fucking, 1920s?
Sure.
And it's an important work of feminist fiction, and Sylvia Plath is this really important figure in history, and it's fine to acknowledge the problems that people had in the past based on your 21st century standards, but you can't then say the book is bad because of that. You can say the book made me uncomfortable,
you can
and
say
that's
you
fine.
didn't like the book.
Yes.
But I don't think it's useful as a metric for judging bad art because it is 12 levels down the subjective pipeline.
Yeah, I'm talking people who say oh, you shouldn't read The Bell Jar because there's some racism in it.
Exactly. That's the problem.
Yeah.
Because there are still things we can learn from problematic art.
Right.
And that's not a disqualifying factor.
And the definition of problematic changes every week.
Of course, you get 100 people in a room.
Year. Yeah.
You'll get 100 different definitions.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't think that's a reliable metric for judging bad art.
Not at all.
I think it ends up with just little factions and people getting upset and walling themselves off.
It just misses the point of a work of art.
In fiction.
Art is not meant to, I mean, sometimes it is, but as a whole, its purpose is not to teach you how to be. It's not to give you a moral lesson. That can be something you take from it. And for some people, that is what they're trying to do. I think that's a little silly to do that. But some people are trying to do that with their art. But that's not everybody's intention.
And the inverse is a good way to maybe hammer this point, because I've seen plenty. I mean, this is mostly a visual thing lately because movies and TV are where the culture is right now.
Sure.
That's the zeitgeist.
Yeah.
I have seen plenty of movies and TV shows whose politics I agree with, and the movies are horseshit.
Yeah.
So it's not...
That's not just it, yeah.
Having the right politics, having good politics doesn't make it a good movie.
Yeah, and having bad politics doesn't make it a bad movie.
And that's I think, the thesis.
Yeah.
Because you can get into 100 other tangents, but I think that's why this argument falls down.
Yeah.
So the next one I want to play with is, how do we define bad art? The answer is, You judge it by its commercial or critical reception.
That's also ridiculous.
But incredibly common.
It is. Of course it is. Yes. Because people are afraid to trust their own judgment and their own opinions. And so they say, well, what do the people who are smarter than me say? I should agree with them.
Like, look at how many people talk about Tenet as a failure, or like a black mark in Christopher Nolan's career.
Yeah, because it came out at the worst possible time.
Right, it was the first movie hit by COVID.
Yeah,
which means, of course, it grossed a lot less than the other movies.
Of course it
but
did,
it's great. But people do judge things that way, including artists. I think, especially artists are vulnerable to this one.
Especially because often artists, I mean, they're hopefully, ideally their goal is to make good art, but also their goal is to, make a living off of their art. So of course, if their movie doesn't, reach commercial or critical success, then they're going to think, oh, I failed on that project. Even if they might think, well, I thought it was a good movie, but I guess no one else thought so. So I guess it's bad. That's a natural human response to that sort of thing.
Sure. Or if a musician has an album that gets low sales and really bad reviews, then is that work of art a failure?
Right.
And I think there are a lot of problems for this one. One, the first problem is that it outsources taste.
Yeah.
And that it means that our opinions about any work of art are bound to quote unquote qualified opinions,
right?
Professional opinions.
Which, by the way, doesn't mean anything. How can you be a qualified expert on judging something so subjective?
And I think the internet has really knocked that one down a peg.
Yeah.
Now that everyone has a voice.
And everyone has their own opinion.
Sure.
Yeah.
And there's less, I think there's less and less credence to the qualified opinion thing.
Yeah, I think that tends to fall with people in older generations because that's what they're used to, and also they're less online.
But also some things age differently. And I think the problem of this criteria is that it is so bound to the moment. When, again, things are so subjective. We did an episode about art we've changed our mind about. And that was discussing works of art that we have evolved with, that we've grown into. Our opinions changed over time. That means you can't judge a thing by just its first week album sales and what a couple professional reviewers thought of it.
Right. The problem is everything is so current and fast and what's the new thing, that things aren't about, it's not about how long they last. It's not about how good they are 6 months later. It's were they good the day they came out. And
I think it's a bad metric because the implicit thing is that art should be instantly consumable and gettable and likable.
The second it's released.
You shouldn't have to struggle with it. You shouldn't have to not just meet it halfway, but come around to it.
Yeah.
There are plenty of, I don't know, I'm talking more about music for this one, but there are plenty of albums that I don't know what I think the first time I heard it.
Yeah.
Or I don't get immediately.
That happens to me a lot. I usually, unless an album is amazing, there are tons of albums that I listened to the first couple times and I'm like, that was fine, and now I love them.
But something being more opaque or difficult doesn't make it bad.
Yeah.
And I don't care. There are so many musicians and artists I love who haven't achieved monstrous commercial or critical success. And that doesn't make them worse.
No.
There's a 2-piece metal band that was active for a couple years, and I bought their CDs from a label that then imploded, and I genuinely don't think you can get them anywhere online now.
Wow.
They were never on any streaming service. It's called Beast in the Field. It's some of the best instrumental metal I've ever heard. It's just a guitarist and a drummer. And it's the loudest, most bombastic, rollicking Flight of the Valkyries type shit you've ever heard. It's unbelievable. They have 3 or 4 albums and a live album.
Yeah.
It's some of the best, most raucous. I use it whenever I'm writing or creating. It's the most inspirational, powerful rock or metal I've ever heard. And they were together for a few years on a label that's gone, and there's nothing now.
Yeah.
There's no aftermarket success there's no real legacy that they can monetize for that.
Yeah, and that
but
sucks
that doesn't
for
matter.
them.
That doesn't make it bad art.
Right. That's frustrating that they didn't get the kind of success they were hoping for, but that doesn't make it bad.
They're incredible.
It's that timeliness is there's so much importance on it. Think about, for example, the Salem's Lot movie that's been in development hell for, not even development, it's done. The movie's done.
Yeah.
But they keep not releasing it for whatever reason. There's COVID stuff and, well, the studio wants to release this.
The strikes.
Yeah, strikes. Yeah. So but it's who cares? I want to see the movie. The movie is done.
Right.
Just put it. And I know that it's like, it's a business. They have to make money, blah, blah, blah. I understand all of that, but it's like, there's not a right time for this movie to be good. Like, if it's good, it's good. So put it out so I can watch it and like enjoy it, you know, like that kind of thing is so frustrating that it's like so dependent on, especially with movies, right? And TV, but other things too. But it's like so dependent on what week is it going to come out and what other things are coming out at that time. Like, can't we just have things and enjoy them?
Yeah. So commercial success, critical success, not a great way of judging good or bad art.
Yeah.
The second and last one I want to play with is people complain or dismiss a work of art if it is quote unquote unfinished. For example, a book series if the author dies before it's done.
Yeah.
And my immediate reaction here is that suggests that the ending of a thing is the most important part of that story. And I think we both have problems with that.
That's wrong, yeah.
Extending it, because there are plenty of things that sort of flub the ending, Stephen King, that are great along the way, and it almost doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But if you extend this into other mediums, people talk about TV shows. Everyone's mad still at the Game of Thrones ending, which I think was fine. But people are still mad at that and said, like, well, it was a total waste of my time.
Yeah, now the show is ruined and I'll never think about it again. And yeah.
But even beyond that, what does that mean for canceled shows?
Yeah. Like, are they bad because they weren't able to be finished?
Because they don't have an ending.
Yeah, like, well, I like that show, but yeah, because there's kind of two prongs. You can be like upset that they never finished it because you like the show and you want to see how it ends. And, you know, it's like frustrating for the people involved that they didn't get to keep making their thing. But then you can also look at it in this other way of, well, I never finished, so don't bother watching it. You know, like that, I think is often a response people will say, like, oh, like I was like, someone says, what show do you like? And they'll say, well, I really liked Mindhunter, but they never got to finish it, so don't bother. You know, which means it makes the whole work of art useless. Or
even like Jane Austen has that unfinished novel.
Yeah,
that's always included in those little collections. Does that make it worse? Isn't it still an interesting work?
Right. It's like not on the same pedestal as the other ones because they were like finished and then published by like the establishment and the people in charge like gave it credibility. Yeah.
But what and then there's the question of what finished means, because there's plenty of art that I love that I think is by definition unfinished. If you bring it back to music, there's a whole world of demos of things recorded on people's phones or a little 8-track thing. There are flawed, raw live recordings that are not the finished, polished version of a song.
But they're like in themselves their own works of art.
My favorite record I own, and I say record because it's not available anywhere else, is a bootleg I got in a Cape Cod record store of Black Sabbath in 1968. So 2 years before even their first album came out. They were touring the first album, the self-titled, and Paranoid, all through Europe. And this was them playing in a bar. It sounds like the microphone, which, I mean, I'm sure it was a shitty microphone in 1968. It sounds like it's at the bottom of a toilet. And you can barely hear what's going on. But you get the energy. And Ozzy is a little muffled, but you can get the instruments okay. But the energy of it, how tight they are as a band already, so long before they're going to release this genre-defining music. It's an incredible document. It's a glorious live album, even though it sounds like shit, and it's kind of a demo and kind of a live version, and it's recorded terribly, and it's a bootleg, but it's great.
Right.
So it's not finished, it's not professional, but it's still great.
Right. We have at my museum, we're putting up an artwork for the first time. We like just acquired it pretty recently, and it's about 20 years old, the artwork, and the artist is still alive. And she, you know, came to like see, you know, the installation, to look at it and stuff. And it's from pretty early in her career, and she was like kind of upset about it because it's like not up to her like standards, and she like wanted to like make changes to it and fix it, like, oh well, can I add a little thing here, or oh but I want to make this thing better. And so even though it's been quote finished for 20 years, she wanted it to be better, and so she was viewing it as unfinished and wanted it to change. And so like that's also really interesting. I mean, talking about when is a work of art finished is a whole other conversation. But it's like, no, like that thing is good, and it's like emblematic of where you were in your career at that time, what ideas you're getting across, because she's like trying to talk about really big, interesting ideas that I won't get into. But it's like she wanted to come in and change it, and I find that so Interesting. So it's like, is the work of art that we got one thing, and then these changes she's made, is that a new work of art? And that's a philosophical,
and I think
the ship problem. But.
That's a good trend. Yeah, the ship of Theseus. That's very good. I think that's a good transition into my last metric, which is really the way I see artists judge whether a work of art is good or bad. And by artists, I mean me, because that's the only person I can speak for. Because most artists, I think, will say that everything they've ever done, except maybe the thing they're working on right now, is terrible. Because there's a metric in your head, there's a standard in your head, an original vision or potential that you're trying to live up to. It's an incredibly insular standard, and it's probably irrelevant for the larger cause, but I think that's another way people judge works of art. If it lives up to their original vision and standard.
Yeah, is it accomplishing the goal that I set out to accomplish?
Right. So I don't, and there are obvious problems with that. I think that's relevant to one person who made it.
Yeah, right, because other people will look at it and love it, or they'll look at it and they might think, oh yeah, I like his other stuff better, or whatever. Even
artists who come to be known or defined by a work of art that they are later very unhappy with. Anthony Burgess with Clockwork Orange, the book.
Yeah.
Plenty of people end up hating the thing that made their name. So I don't think that's a great metric either, even if it is just contained to the artist's perspective.
Right. So because people can think, oh, this is the greatest thing I've ever seen.
Sure.
But the artist will have a really different opinion.
So none of these are great. We have formal mechanics, assumed politics, critical commercial reception, unfinished art, and for artists, if it lives up to the original vision. I don't think any of those are great qualifiers or ways to define bad art.
Right.
So then this is where we get into the repercussions have. Does this mean, if none of those definitions work, does this mean that there is no bad art?
Well, for who? For individuals or just in general? Because I think there is, but I can't really tell what I'm judging it by.
Sure, and I think subjective, yes, everyone's going to have their preferences and dislikes, but are you asking, is there any objectively bad art? Is that what you're...
Yeah, or I'm trying to figure out what your question is. Yeah.
However you want to take it.
Because I think another prong that we didn't really get into, but it's so hard to judge, is just personal enjoyment. How do you judge a thing? How much I liked it. Even if I can't tell why I didn't like something, there are certain works of art that I look at, read, watch, listen to, whatever, that I'm like, I didn't like that. And I can't tell you why.
Sure.
But it's bad to me because I didn't like it.
So there is subjectively good and bad art.
Sure, of course, because everyone's got an opinion on
But
things.
Is there objectively good or bad work?
I want to say yes, but that's so hard because I'm a person with subjective opinions. So it's kind of hard for me to say. Which then I guess extends to, does that matter? Because none of us can be objective.
Right.
So does it? And I say all the time on this show, oh, that is objectively bad. I say that, and I know that I know that I can't say that 100% honestly.
Because if you say there is objectively bad art, then you have to get that definition.
Yeah, and say, okay, how does one define that?
Right. What is the standard? And then you fall back on everything that we just disagreed with about formal mechanics and success and blah, blah, blah.
Well, I think a pretty good, it's not perfect, but I think a pretty good metric is sort of combining some of these things we're talking about.
Okay.
When an artist sets out to create something, they have a goal in mind. They're either trying to make a really good TV drama, or they're trying to make a really silly, fun romance, or they're trying to make a really weird comic, or they're trying to make a really fun pop album or whatever. And I think the mistake that a lot of people make when trying to evaluate and judge art is they are not judging it by the right standards. They're basing it on how much do I like it, how much is it checking off the boxes that I like to be checked off in art, and rather than looking at, does this thing accomplish what the artist set out to do? And I don't mean what you said about the artist, where it's is it meeting their own standards? Because when I'm judging a work of art, I'm not judging it based on what the artist thinks, right? It's about what I think, but I still have to apply the lens that the artist has put on it. So for example, a lot of people harp on romance. Romance books because they're not written well, and they're not they're
this
super
is a beautiful
predictable.
Transition, by the way.
Oh, great! I'm so proud of myself.
About.
Well, they're super predictable,
and
they're it's just a dumb story where there's a lot of sex, but the romance is cheesy and the dialogue is bad, and it's okay. this person writing, The Duchess Deal by Tessa Dare. She's not writing.
I love watching you flip through your mental
I was
catalog.
like, which one should I pick? It's like, that's one of my favorite romance novels of all time. I
Sure.
fucking love that book.
Yeah.
She's not trying to write like a Pulitzer Prize, like literary fiction. That's not what she's going for.
But it's great.
She is going for a fun story.
Yeah.
Like slightly accurate, but just enough for it to work, but still like it still works for our 21st century palettes, like Regency romance. And there's like a little like pretty unrealistic like things happening between them, and the characterization is a little stereotypical, and it's like this like strong woman who's like, I hate my dad, and then it's like this man who's like, I hate everyone, I don't know how to love.
Yeah, Dorothy.
And she turns his heart to gold, and they love each other.
She fixes him.
Like, it's absurd, but I think that book is accomplishing exactly what it set out to accomplish. It is fun,
Right.
It is silly, it is heartwarming, and it is a delight to read. I love that book. And so by that metric, that is a great work of art. It is not the best book I've ever read if you like zoom out and you want to be all intellectual about
Sure.
it, because like I've read other books that are better, and like the best example is like Jane Austen is better than that. But Jane Austen wasn't trying to do what Tessa Dare's trying to do.
So you're almost getting into a highbrow, lowbrow thing.
Right.
Which is, I think people view that as sort of a binary by which they can dismiss anything they consider lowbrow.
I should also say, I used to be one of those people that
We all
looked
did.
down upon romance and any sort of like pulpy type of thing, right? I was like, oh, that's not like good. That's like trashy. But like I'm older now. I'm wiser now.
You've also embraced, and I think I have too, your subjectivity.
Right.
That you can only speak for yourself.
Right.
But there's a humility in saying, just because I don't like it, and this is sort of what I have in my notes, I call something a good work of art if it captures my imagination. I don't use any of the other metrics. Does it speak to me? Did I get something out of it? But to zoom out, to broaden that into a declaration about all of mankind and say this has no value if it didn't speak to one of 8 billion people, I think that's a mistake. And the way I want to finish this, the reason I wanted to do this episode, and that this has been in the can for a few months, is because I just finished reading the 50 Shades of Grey trilogy. That was the impetus for this whole project.
That's right. I forgot
So,
about that.
I
I didn't forget you read it, but I didn't forget that you read it, but I forgot that that's why you wanted to do this episode.
I listened to the audiobooks. Yes, I did. And I was interested in this series because I greatly enjoyed the movies.
We've talked about them on the show like a weird amount.
Those
movies are so fun.
They are the greatest comedies of the years
Oh
they
my
came
gosh,
out. I've
they're
said
so
that
fucking
before.
funny. They're so good.
They're gold. They're gold. The casting, Dakota Johnson is genuinely a treasure. I love her
I
in
love
everything.
Dakota Johnson. She's one of my favorite actresses.
And Jamie Dornan's great too.
He's
but
fine.
I think he has a harder role to sell.
He does. He
Mr.
really, really
Grey.
does. He does.
So I went into these books on a lark, right? Not
Yes.
knowing what to expect.
Just for
And
giggles.
My reading experience, I can tell you now, Maggie, was incredibly entertaining.
I
Not
mean, I
only-
heard some of it in the car when we were driving. You
Yes.
play it for me, and I was like, this is a wild romp. This
We
is
did a
fun.
road trip on the way to see Tristan, who you guys will know from our House of the Dragon and Diablo episodes, a couple other ones. And they're so much fun. And we were cackling the whole
Oh my
time.
gosh.
There are such repeated phrases that
Yeah.
they almost feel like in-jokes.
The ghost of a smile. That one happens a lot. Also, her weirdly biting her lip all the time. So funny.
And there are extensive passages of reading email chains
Oh my God.
between Anastasia and Christian.
And like, to be fair, if you're reading the book like on the page, you don't have to read all of those details that say like date, from, subject, to, but like in the
and the
audiobook,
full signature at the end.
right, but in
It's
the audiobook
everything.
she has to read all of it, and it's so painful.
Every part of an email, every word written on your screen when you're typing an email is read in the books. And there will be what feels like pages of these
Oh my
on
gosh.
end.
Oh my
It'll
gosh.
just descend into email threads for minutes at a time.
You probably spent a collective like 3 hours just hearing the intros and sign-offs of emails, not even the content of the emails, just the details
Right.
around it.
And the agony of the book, and I'm glad this wasn't in the movie, but the agony of the book is not the BDSM. It's the email chains. It's hearing the signatures 12 times and hearing them flirt. It's not the ball gags and the whips and whatever
Right,
else there is. It's the flirting,
But it's the worst
in the emails.
It's the worst flirting
But
you've ever seen.
It's not, I mean, it's bad in that it's bad flirting, and wonky writing.
And not how anybody talks. Yeah.
But it's incredibly entertaining.
Yes, right.
And we were giggling and laughing and enjoying it. But under the surface, and this is where I must be honest with myself.
Okay.
I listened to all 3 of these books when I didn't have to. I didn't even have to finish the first one.
Yeah,
if
it's
I
not
started
like,
it as a joke.
I did the first one. Okay, great. That was fun. Like, you did all 3.
And why did I do that? Because I was genuinely compelled by the characters. Despite the quality, however we're judging that, of the writing, the repetition, the formula, the whatever, the characters were interesting for a whole series.
Yeah.
And regardless of all the other faults, of all the other formal whatevers, I kept wanting to know what was going to happen next.
Sure.
Even though the book was quote-unquote bad, and bad art by all formal metrics, I was compelled. So if I'm holding myself to this standard that I'm throwing out there in this episode, does that make this series good art? I would have to say yes.
Yeah.
But because I don't think that a work of art is necessarily bad just because it doesn't speak to me.
Right.
And this one did speak to me, but the things that I've wrestled with in the past of works of art I don't like, whether it's a legacy sequel that I think goes against the grain of what the original one was, whether it's an adaptation that I think is unfaithful or stomps all over what the original one did. I think it's easier to talk about adaptations that you hate. But that doesn't make those bad works of art.
Right.
That just means that they don't speak to me.
Right.
So not only is that an infinitesimally small way to judge things, 1 out of 8 billion opinions, but I, as that one person, can just move on to the next work of art. And there are an endless number of works of art.
There are plenty of things to choose from. You're never going to run out of things.
Doing this podcast and covering 2 works of art a week, if we lived for 1,000 years, we wouldn't scratch the surface
No, of course
of
not.
the art created in one day.
Or even like the art that we actually consume in real life. Like there's plenty of things that we're consuming, but we just don't have space to talk about. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the way that this problem gets calcified, this bad art label becomes this toxic term that people throw at things. I think it's about that emotional reaction.
Yeah.
I think it's not a coincidence that most of the time people are upset about bad art. It's because it's an adaptation or legacy sequel.
Sure.
Because I think people get it. Besides that, if you're walking through the aisles of Barnes & Noble and you see a romance novel and you're not interested in romance novels, you keep walking.
Right.
You don't get upset and talk about it for 2 years.
No.
But if it's something you're invested in from your childhood or whatever, then you get upset about it, I guess. But if you don't want to keep getting your heart broken, move on to something not owned by Disney.
Truly, yeah.
And the thing I've learned maybe as I've grown older, and especially as I've done this show with you, is to keep an open mind. Is to learn rough edges, texture, to appreciate ambition more than the polish or production value of a perfectly finished product.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's why we like the Saw movies so much. I think me 10 years ago, part of it is 10 years ago, I wasn't very into horror, but even so, I would have because I saw the first Saw movie about 10 years ago, maybe a little bit longer actually. No, it was about 10 years ago. And, I was very afraid of it, but I recognized it, that movie is technically very, very good. It is, and it doesn't have the same flavor as the other Saw movies, which get a little bit ridiculous and overly convoluted, and there's a lot of retconning, and they're a little bit silly, right? I think I would have looked down on those other movies. I think I probably would have had the opinion of, oh, well, the first Saw movie is great, but the rest are not good. Just watch the first one because I am so smart and high and mighty. But now that I think have learned to look at things and judge them in a bit more of a more thoughtful way, I really, really enjoy the Saw sequels. We've talked about that. We did a whole episode on the last Halloween. They are so much fun, and they are accomplishing, I think, what they've set out to accomplish. Here is a fun, freaky horror movie with lots of weird gore and traps, and an absurdly convoluted plot, and he was actually in the box the whole time, and he was alive. And the musical cue, it's so much fun. And so I'm having a great time watching those movies because I don't have my film critic hat on. I can just enjoy things for what they are.
So the question is almost irrelevant. Is there bad art? I don't know. Probably not. The question, the thing that matters, the thing you should focus on, is there is an overwhelming amount of art.
Right.
There's an incalculable amount of art.
And there are things you're going to really like and things you're really not going to like. But if you don't like it, just move on and don't be mad about it.
Right.
And because you'll find something else that you like.
You'll find something that you will love. You will find a work of art that will change your life, which has happened to us 100 times on this show. We're almost 300 episodes deep. And I have had so many. I mean, there are episodes where we come in euphoric and changed.
The Batman.
There's so much great. I mean, even like Tusk, something I wasn't expecting.
Yeah.
That I think most people have a dreadful, unvarnished, unnuanced opinion
Unfair opinion of, yeah.
But I thought that movie was astounding.
I thought it was great, yeah.
So yeah, I think the question is impossible to answer and probably irrelevant.
I agree.
Because I can definitively say there is good art. Subjectively,
Yes.
objectively, whatever.
Yes.
There is good art.
Yes, there is.
There might be bad art. Good luck defining it.
I think it's a spectrum of good.
But
it's
there's
all
definitely
good in
good art.
some way. Exactly.
Yeah.
I love
Cool.
that. Well, I hope this inspires you to make something, because even if someone else hates it, someone else might love it.
If you're not a creative person, go find some good art.
Right.
Go find.
Open your mind.
There's so much out there
Just
that
let
will change your
yourself
life.
enjoy things. Like, you don't have to be so, high and mighty.
You don't like Seven? Move on. Move on. Yeah. So that was our episode.
That was fun.
I hope you enjoyed that.
Yes.
I enjoyed this.
I enjoyed this too. Now I'm excited because we're about to go see a movie that will hopefully be a great work of art.
Yes, we are.
I'm very, very excited.
Cool. So if you want more episodes, we have episodes pretty much every Tuesday and Friday. We have long-term
Always
fantasy
Friday, but
literary
sometimes
analysis series on Fridays. We did all of Lord of the Rings. We're doing all of The Witcher, and then we're about to start a big new series. Tuesdays, we do all sorts of other works of art. Anything that speaks to us in any way, we talk about on Tuesdays.
Yes.
If you want bonus episodes, including an exclusive episode every month and a whole back catalog of a year and a half of bonus episodes and thoughts and theories, you can join us on Patreon for $2 a month. You can support the show and get access to all of that fun exclusive content.
We also love hearing your feedback and ideas. So if you if you have thoughts on what's good art, what's bad art, send us an email, secondbreakfastpod@gmail.com. Or if you're on Patreon, this is a Patreon post. You can comment down below. Is this going on YouTube?
Yes, it is.
Then you can also leave a comment in the YouTube. Also, if you're on YouTube, like and subscribe. We never say that. Like and subscribe. Do that, please.
Throw us a bone.
Throw us a bone.
Cool. All right. We have to head off to a movie. So thank you for joining us. Thank you for listening. As always, have a lovely couple days, because this will be a Tuesday episode. And we will see you on Friday with a brand new episode.
Bye.